That is a basic way to drive a tank.
But real training only comes when the tank crew acquires first-hand experience, right in the middle of a battle, firing live ammunition. At the National Training Center at Fort Irwin in California, the U.S. Army replicates realistic battles. Here the tanks are joined by other mobile units to deliver a combined arms assault. These ultra-realistic war games were the prime reason for the outstanding performance of the U.S. armored units in the Gulf War. Desert Storm was the last great test of the tank. In 4 days, the Allied coalition evicted the Iraqi forces that had invaded Kuwait. Some 2,000 M1A1s were the backbone of the most powerful armored force ever mobilized. Desert Storm began with a furious air campaign. The ground war followed. Using computerized firing systems, the Allied tanks took the Iraqi tanks completely by surprise.
We began to hit them before they could ever even acquire us, let alone return fire. It was truly a devastating effect that was in fact quite lopsided, and consequently it put them in a position to decide whether if they wanted to stay and die, try to run and die, or to surrender. And they did a little of each.
It was a decisive result. In just 100 hours, over 2,000 Iraqi tanks were destroyed. The world's fourth largest armored force was reduced to tangled metal.
The pure explosion of kinetic energy is something to behold. It's almost as if you see a phosphorus fire, an instantaneous flash, which then would ignite onboard munitions and fuel, which would then give you a secondary explosion, which would take the in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 ton turret and expel it into the air as almost as if a garbage can was flying in the air, and it would land anywhere from 50 to 100 meters away from the tank.
Despite the ferocity of the ground battle, not one single M1 was destroyed by enemy fire.
At the end, you turn around and look, and they're all still there, and the troops are smiling, and they're glad that they were able to do their mission. It's just something to behold.
Tanks were invented by the British Army to help fight the trench warfare of the First World War. In 1960, millions of soldiers were pinned down by German machine guns and artillery on the Western Front. They were in desperate need of an extreme machine. The Holt Caterpillar tractor gave the British their inspiration. Military designers built a machine to carry guns that had a bulletproof engine and a revolutionary system of caterpillar tracks. It was built to bridge the German trenches and crush the mounds of tangled barbed wire. These machines were kept so secret that the production workers were told they were constructing water carriers. So they got stuck with the name tank. Each machine had a crew of 8. The interior was almost unbearable. The men were often overcome by carbon monoxide poisoning, and for protection, they wore chain mail visors. It was at the Battle of Cambrai in 1917 that tanks made a spectacular debut. The Army took the Germans completely by surprise when 400 tanks broke through the impenetrable barrier of barbed wire along the Hindenburg Line. The tanks advanced 5 miles in 6 hours. 4,000 Germans were captured. Soon, the Germans built their own, supposedly indestructible tanks. Huge, armored fortresses with a crew of 18. But they proved far too cumbersome and were easy prey for the Allies. During the last few days of World War I, it was the British tanks that chased the enemy back into Germany. The tank had made its mark as the ultimate war machine. Since the early days, the tank has become a much more sophisticated machine, but it still has the same priorities: survivability, mobility, and killing power. The armor on a tank has to provide protection for the vehicle and its crew. But if it carries too much armor, it can't move fast enough. The challenge is to gain maximum protection with minimum weight. For the M1A2, the armor is cut from steel plate. In places, protection is up to a foot thick. The total weight of this armored plate accounts for half the weight of the fully laden tank. Each tank is held together by 1.5 miles of welding. The welds alone weigh over half a ton. Tanks are built in 2 separate parts.
What goes in this big hole here is a turret, which contains the weapon systems of the tank.
Inside the hull are pipes and cables to link the digital processors which control the tank.
It's more like a computer within a big armored box, sort of like your internal LAN system within your home PC.
The systems are high-tech, but the tank's mobility still depends on the continuous tracks invented 80 years ago. They're designed to spread the weight of the tank over a large surface area, so it's less likely to get bogged down. On the M1A2, each track is 50 feet long, made up of 79 metal segments with replaceable rubber blocks. The tracks are driven by drive wheels, powered by the engine at the rear of the tank. The tank is steered by altering the speed at which each track is driven. The killing power of a tank is determined by its firepower. The main armament of the M1A2 is the 120mm smoothbore gun. Before it is installed into the tank, every gun is tested with live ammunition. Tanks are controlled by computer, and every last electrical component must be checked. These systems also allow the crew to communicate by email with the command center and to receive pictures showing where the tank stands on the battlefield. When the turret and the hull are completed, they're joined together. The seal is so perfect that it protects the crew from chemical warfare. Each tank consists of over 5,000 parts and costs $4.5 million. The final stage is to paint the exterior in the relevant camouflage colors. From start to finish, it takes 4 months to build each tank.